next National Director of Public Prosecutions. The appointment will take effect on the 1st of next month as the tenure of the current head, Shamila Batohi, comes to an end. Ramaphosa has appointed Mothibi despite the advisory panel, which interviewed 6 candidates for the position, indicating in its report that none was suitable. Ramaphosa is adamant that Mothibi has distinguished himself as an outstanding head of the Special Investigating Unit. Ramaphosa was speaking at an African National Congress Party fundraising golf tournament in Rustenburg in the Northwest Province to celebrate the party's 114th anniversary.
I instituted this process of having a very transparent and open manner in which a public official like the head of the NPA should be appointed. The last time when Shamila Batohi was appointed, I opened up a process which many people welcomed. It's not in the law. The law says the president can appoint whomever he wants. But I felt that because of the importance of the position, we should open it up. So in the end, because of the shortness of the time, I then relied on what the Constitution empowers me as president to do. And it is for that reason that I decided to appoint Mothibi.
Earlier, the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, CASAC, said the appointment was unexpected. Lawson Naidu is the Executive Secretary.
I think it is a bit of a surprise that the president has made this announcement in the manner that he has. But, before I get into that, I think, the point I want to make is that I think the appointment of Advocate Mothibi must be welcomed. He's certainly a seasoned operator within the criminal justice system, brings with him a track record that will, I think, help the NPA to re-establish its credibility in the eyes of the public. The concern around the process, however, is a legitimate one. It may have been better if the president had said to the panel, I see your report, you've not recommended anyone, can you please consider the following person or persons and conduct additional interviews before that appointment?
The Azanian People's Organization, AZAPO, in South Africa is calling on the football governing body, FIFA, to ban the U.S. from international competitions, citing the country's aggression towards Venezuela. The party has condemned the U.S. military strikes and the abduction of Maduro and his wife, saying they are a violation of international law. AZAPO President Nelvis Qakema.
Trump and the U.S. have violated first the constitution of the U.S. Because you could never go or invade another country without the sanction or the agreement by the Congress of the U.S. And they have done so, which means this is an impeachment offense by Trump. Number 2, they have also violated international law in terms of the United Nations Charter. So in that sense, the U.S. has in fact committed the worst political thuggery anybody can think of, quite satanic, to kidnap a sitting president of a sovereign state and go and try him with his spouse in another country. This is really worrying.
And lastly, the U.S. Department of Health has frozen child care and family assistance in 5 states which Democrats govern. It has alleged without evidence concerns over fraud and misuse of public funds in state-run programs. The BBC's Yusuf Tahi.
The states affected are California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. The total value of the program cuts is just over $10.6 billion. The Deputy Health Secretary, Jim O'Neill, said his department was committed to the integrity of assistance programs as well as fiscal responsibility and complying with federal requirements. New York Governor Kathy Hochul said that the cuts were an attack on children and vowed to fight them head-on. A spokesperson for the Colorado governor's office said that if true, it would be awful to see the federal government targeting the most needy families and children this way.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, AFCON quarterfinal lineup has now been confirmed while Ben Stokes suffers an injury in the final Ashes test. Details of these and other stories coming up at 12:30.
This is Africa Update, your pulse to the continent. Stories shaping nations and voices driving change. Stay informed, stay connected, right here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
You are watching Africa Update. Coming up in this hour, the 8 boys that they had met were actually 10. The other 2 had been taken away.
A 47-year-old foreign national has been arrested in Johannesburg's central business district on suspicion of human trafficking, and China's foreign minister is visiting Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho. Those are just some of the stories we are covering this afternoon on the Africa Update. We are broadcasting live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa, and we are obviously on the DSTV audio bouquet channel 802, on OpenView on channel 628, and you can live stream us on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Google and Apple Play stores. You can also download the Channel Africa app on the Google and Apple Play stores. Well, join us too in a conversation by finding us on X at Channel Africa numerical 1, so that's Channel Africa 1, Facebook at Channel Africa, Instagram at Channel Africa 1. You can also subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. Remember to use the hashtag Africa Update when you do communicate with us. We are looking forward to those discussions. And of course, on today's hashtag Africa Update asks, we're asking you the question: China's foreign minister is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho. What are your hopes and ambitions regarding this particular visit? The visit began today. Wang Li already on his way. Share your thoughts on Channel Africa's social media platforms at Channel Africa 1 on X and Instagram, as well as Channel Africa on Facebook. Or you can send us comments and voice notes to our WhatsApp number 2, and that number is +27 832 886684. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more news for you and, of course, those discussions.
Tune in and turn up the volume. This is Channel Africa.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu masuala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
Cling cling. Turn up the African vibe, Africa style. Tune in on the Channel Africa app or log on to our website, channelafrica.co.za.
All right, so welcome back to the show. You are listening to Africa Update on Channel Africa with me, Unathi Batyashe, for Lulu Gabu. Let's get right into it. Of course, we're monitoring developments across the continent as across the globe. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is currently touring Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho as part of a diplomatic push to reinforce Beijing's influence in Africa. Now, his stop in Somalia is particularly notable, marking the first visit by a Chinese foreign minister to the country since the 1980s. To discuss this further, we're now joined by visiting professor at Wits Law School, Mia Swart. Mia, a very good afternoon to you, Prof, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I look forward to the discussion.
So, Prof, we understand, of course, that this is an annual New Year tour of Africa as it relates to China. But perhaps give us more context on this, particularly if you look at the geopolitical landscape that we are currently in. I mean, what does China aim to achieve through this high-level visit, like Wang Yi's tour of these countries, including Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho?
Right. That's a very good question. And of course, the temptation is to think that this is maybe, a quick response to Trump actions on Saturday, attacking Venezuela sort of out of the blue in blatant violation of international law.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's an annual trip that's always scheduled for early in January. And this is simply another one of those trips. But of course, it's infused with special significance now because of Trump's attacks. And, China now has a lot at stake. They really want to show that they want to expand their influence in the region and, show their status in the region and to assert themselves. So it's also very interesting that the first stop is Somalia, which we know, there's been two very significant news items on Somalia recently. The one was, of course, the US's recognition of Somaliland. And the other was, Trump's very sort of scathing, awful and insulting reference to Somalis living in the US. So I think this is a very, very auspicious and important time for China to show its strength in the region and to maybe show much more goodwill than the US has displayed. When Trump uses this kind of rhetoric, he's of course alienating the region, and China very cleverly and strategically is showing we are engaging with the region.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interest in the region. Yes.
Yeah, and I want us to stay on Somalia, Prof, because I think it does speak volumes, particularly as you've referenced in recognition of the U.S. on Somaliland. I mean, are there potential risks then for China in getting more involved in fragile states like Somalia, given the fact that also China, we understand, is seeking to secure these key shipping routes and resource supply lines, when you also juxtapose that with China's reaction on the U.S. airstrikes on Venezuela?
Yes, well, China in some sense has no choice. It has to protect its interests in Somalia in general, because it's extremely concerned with its access to the Gulf of Aden and, to the Red Sea and those passages that give them access to the Suez Canal, the trade access that is vital for them to Europe. And this is something, we've seen attacks even happening in the Gulf of Aden ever since last year. It's an absolute international hotspot that China has a burning interest to, expand its influence in. So for that reason, Somalia is really important. And again, it was no coincidence that Trump, said these scathing things about the Somalis, followed Netanyahu's lead in recognizing Somaliland. It's a very important part of the world, and it's therefore also shows how savvy the Chinese are, to first go to Somaliland.
Yeah,
Somalia.
Yeah. And I mean, just looking at those dynamics, I would imagine that the questions around the timing are why we are so interested in Somalia, given the fact that, as we've said, that this is the first visit by a Chinese foreign minister to the country since the 1980s. But let's take it then, I think a little bit wider in terms of, are we then seeing these political or geopolitical shift? What are, significant moves that countries like China need to do in terms of growing its footprint and shift those regional alliances, notwithstanding, of course, its interest that's always been there, but given too the pressures that we are seeing now geopolitically, particularly when you look at influences from the West?
Well, it's said that one of the purposes of Wang Yi's trip to Africa is to deepen trust. And again, the Chinese in some ways can benefit from this global climate now, because of course there's a vast lack of trust in the Trump administration now, in this belligerent administration that is acting in ways that completely violate the UN Charter. So there's a bit of a dispute or a disagreement between, prominent commentators on whether Trump's actions are good or bad for China. There's a division on this. It looks like obviously, from the point of view of blocking oil access to Venezuela, this cannot look very good for China, right? Even though they came out very strongly in the Security Council and immediately condemned Trump's actions very strongly, and might not show all their cards about how nervous they might be about, basically the US hijacking all this oil from Venezuela. But it's a very clever move for them to now go to Somalia, go to other African countries, to also show they are not obsessed with only oil. I mean, China's economic interests are really vast. We're looking at infrastructure development, digital technology, the agricultural sector in Africa. It is so vast that the US can almost not compete with that. China is also far ahead of the US in terms of long-standing ties that it has developed with countries.
Yeah.
Of course, there's still the concern that it's neocolonialism, that they're trying to win support for the One Africa policy. All of this is very concerning from a human rights point of view, for sure. But that it's a clever strategic move to now show how strong they are, how extensive their interests are, is for sure.
Yeah, and that was going to be my last question as we wrap the show in terms of its approach to Africa, how that has changed since the 1980s. But very quickly, Prof, as we wrap up our conversation, what do you make of then Israel's visit to Somaliland, given the fact that we are now here where Somalia is still recognized by many other countries, Israel, of course, being an ally to the United States?
Yes, well, it's very, very clever of China to go straight to Somalia, to bolster their diplomatic ties with Somalia, to show we are absolutely against this move by the US, which is obviously just driven by the Israelis. And many African countries are absolutely going to support China for good reasons and bad reasons. A country like Lesotho, one of the poorest countries in Africa, is obviously thirsty for that investment. The heavy tariffs slapped on Lesotho by Trump is another reason why they will edge closer to China. So we're going to see very interesting, shifting alliances, and also closer alliances with China and with BRICS.
Absolutely. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. That was, of course, the visiting professor at Wits Law School, Professor Mia Swart. All right, of course, let's remind you then of our question of the day before we go to other news. On today's hashtag Africa Update asks, China's foreign minister is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania and Lesotho. What are your hopes and ambitions regarding this visit? Of course, that was the conversation we were posing to our guest, Prof. Mia Swart. Share your thoughts on Channel Africa's social media platforms at Channel Africa 1. That's on X and Instagram, as well as at Channel Africa on Facebook. Or you can send us your comments via voice note or WhatsApp number at +27 83 288 6684. All right, let's take you to this now, one of our top stories that we are actually tracking for you this afternoon. In fact, before we do that, let's take a quick break. We'll be back with more for you.
Let the good times roll. From the 10th of October, make a note. Channel Africa is stepping into a brand new era with the launch of our upgraded website and app. It's easy, fresh, and always on your fingertips. Wherever you are in the world, Africa's voice is just a click away. The future of Channel Africa goes live from the 10th of October. Don't miss the moments. Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gabu on Channel Africa.
Right, welcome back. Unathi Batyashe in for Lulu Gabu. Let's continue then to give you some of our stories that we have for you today. Let's turn to South Africa now. A 47-year-old foreign national has been arrested in Johannesburg's Central Business District on suspicion of human trafficking. The man was detained after police intercepted a vehicle and rescued 2 teenage boys, while another 10 were found walking around half naked on Broad Street in Malberton, a suburb that is located in the south of Johannesburg city in South Africa. The suspect is expected to appear in court tomorrow, that's on Thursday, facing charges of being an illegal immigrant and suspected trafficking in persons. Hawks spokesperson Colonel Katlego Mogale elaborates for us.
The boys were first noticed by the security services that was working there, Fox Security, and they needed assistance, which they sought from the Johannesburg Metro Police. And because there was language barrier, it took them a while to understand that the 8 boys that they had met were actually 10. The other 2 had been taken away by allegedly a blue VW Jetta, which was heading towards the Johannesburg CBD.
All right. Meanwhile, that was the Hawks spokesperson, Colonel Katlego Mogale. Meanwhile, a group of 14 South African youths lured to Thailand with the promises of employment are facing deportation today after being detained for allegedly being victims of human trafficking. The group was reportedly recruited by a South African male, and their situation has sparked concerns about the safety and the well-being of South Africans abroad. For the latest, we're now joined by security strategist and retired Interpol Ambassador Andy Mashaile. Mr. Mashaile, a very good afternoon to you. Always a pleasure speaking to you, and thank you so much for your time. These are very concerning stories. Let's begin, in fact, with the previous story, the one of the 10 teenage boys that were found half naked, walking around and wandering around in Malberton. Just your reaction to this and the potential of this being wider than we actually realize in terms of human trafficking, a ring or even a cartel operating in the country.
Yep. And compliments of the new season, Unathi Batyashe. It is very important that we indicate to South Africans and the people in the SADC region that we have become targets. We have become the hunting ground for slave tradesmen. Why am I talking about slave tradesmen? You and I talked of a nice English concept called trafficking in persons or human trafficking, as it were. It reminds me of the 1700s when some of the people, some of our chiefs in donors were selling their own people in their own communities in this continent, and those people have built America and at a very cheap cost. And now the eastern part of the world, Eastern Asia, is copying that model of buying slaves from some of those South African people, South African men, South African recruiters, so that they can build their countries. Thailand, that area in Myanmar, just across the jungle, you go into Myanmar and you don't have your right to your passport. You can't call your parents. And meanwhile, your parents, under the impression that Unathi and Andy, our daughter and our son, are going to make a living there and are going to improve our conditions because of unemployment in our community, unemployment in our countries that has gone very sky high. These are some of the serious things, Unathi, that you and I, the people of this country and this continent, must begin to see and address properly. Human trafficking is slavery. It's a new form of slavery, and we have got to bring this slavery project to an end by ensuring that those who are agents, the runners, the one man who's arrested is just a runner. There are the higher-ups, and the higher-ups are hell-bent on ensuring that this slave trade booms like it boomed in the 1700s.
Yeah. I mean, given that these are recurring incidences, particularly when you look at these 10 young boys that were found in Malberton in this country, given what we saw even in 2025, what coordination then should or ought to happen between our law enforcement authorities when you look at the likes of the South African Police Service, Home Affairs, Social Development, and other international agencies, dare I say, even as far as to go into Interpol coordination?
Unathi, I am sorry for those young boys. I'm just imagining if it were me during my days when I was a small boy and these things were happening. Or my son Tumelo and my son Tato, if they are to be found and they are to find themselves in another country when they cannot even speak the language. This suggests to you and I that one, we must overload awareness on our national media and on our socials. And what am I talking about? In some of these soaps that we watch, we need to put that product placement of freedom from slavery, freedom from human trafficking. This is one of the things that we're supposed to do. And at a prevention or a combating point of view, we need to do what other African countries are doing, or what AfriPol is doing, bringing together all those countries that are hotspots for human trafficking. They operate like a ring, and they have a freedom project or an operation that targets the owners of the process. The owners of the process would be the buyers of these boys. These boys were bought from their own countries. Their parents were given an X amount of money on the pretext that there will be more that's coming to them from their children. So we have to ensure that we go into all the corners of our continent, our rural areas in those continents. Talk about DRC, talk about Mozambique in the rural areas, talk about Botswana in the rural areas, talk about Zimbabwe in the rural areas. Those areas where there is high levels of poverty, high levels of unemployment, AfriPol with the local enforcement police services like FATF have got to come together and ensure that there's a program that happens on national radio every day in the form of a campaign, so that you are able to disrupt the operation of these human traffickers.
Let's leave it there. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Really important conversation, also raising concerns when you also look at other incidences and reports that we've seen, including how young people were recruited under false pretenses for the roles in Russia and Ukraine. But thank you so much for your time. That was security strategist and retired Interpol ambassador Andy Mashaile, joining us there. Important discussion to have. Of course, we are now going to take you to news, but very quickly before that, let's remind you then of our Africa Update asks a question. China's foreign minister is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho. We are asking you, what are your hopes and ambitions regarding this visit? Please use our social media platforms at Channel Africa 1 on X and Instagram, at Channel Africa on Facebook for that. But for now, let's take you straight to news.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Unathi. In your new headlines, the Africa Union's Political Affairs, Peace and Security Council has called for the immediate revocation of Israel's recognition of Somaliland. The South African Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Justice and Constitutional Development has welcomed President Cyril Ramaphosa's appointment of Andy Mothibi as the next National Director of Public Prosecutions. And China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has begun his annual New Year tour of Africa today, focusing on strategic trade access across Eastern and Southern Africa as Beijing seeks to secure key shipping routes and resource supply lines. He will travel to Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Lesotho on this trip, which runs until January the 12th. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And it's a very good afternoon from the sports desk. I am Musibu Di Makura with your latest sports news at the Sawa. So Algeria winger Haji Musa insists the manner of their victory over the Democratic Republic of Congo is secondary to reaching the quarterfinals of the Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Now, the Desert Warriors needed extra time last night to see off a stubborn Congolese outfit, with the tie edging towards penalties before substitute Adil Bobina struck the decisive goal to break the deadlock. The win sends Algeria into the last 8, where they will face Nigeria in Marrakesh on Sunday, and Musa was quick to acknowledge the quality of the West Africans.
It's a good team from Congo with good players. As I said last time, we also have good players. A match, as we know very well, in the knockout stage, it's 120 minutes. We scored in the last 5, the last 10 minutes, so we're very happy. Since we've qualified, that's the main thing.
Musa went on to concluded by looking ahead to their clash against the Super Eagles of Nigeria.
We know very well that it's a good team. There's Lukman Ousmane, 2 former Algerian Ballon d'Or winners. We also have an Algerian Ballon d'Or winner at Riyadh. So we're going to try to give our all.
On to some cricket news now. Captain Ben Stokes suffered an abductor injury in the 4th morning of the 5th Ashes Test to become yet another casualty of England's awful Ashes tour. Now, Stokes bowled 10 deliveries from the beginning of play on Wednesday, then pulled up in his follow-through, holding his right groin. The all-rounder immediately returned to the dressing room at the Sydney Cricket Ground, handing control of the England team to vice-captain Harry Brook. Now, Stokes was off the field for the remainder of Australia's first innings, then slid down the batting order to number 8 in England's second innings. With his movement severely hampered, he was out from 1 to the 4th ball he faced, poking off spinner Bo Webster to slip. Now, England ended the 4th day on 302 for the loss of 8 wickets, 119 runs ahead. The tourists will monitor the skipper before a decision is taken on Stokes' participation in Thursday's final day of the series. On to some swimming news now. South African swimming sensation, that is Peter Kotsia, is now looking ahead to the Commonwealth Games that are set to take place later on this year. This after he finished in that Olympic Games in 2024, just outside the podium, and is now regarded as one of the favourites to get South Africa a medal in the Commonwealth Games. The 21-year-old is set to spearhead Team South Africa at the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow, Scotland from the 23rd of July to the 2nd of August. Kotsia made his Olympic debut back in 2021 and first competed at the Commonwealth Games in 2022. After reaching the final at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, he believes he has grown significantly and is now ready to take the next step of his career in representing South Africa now at the Commonwealth Games. And finally, in tennis news, Grigor Dimitrov marked his injury comeback with a huge win over Pablo Carreno Busta in Brisbane yesterday. It's been 6 months since his brutal injury at the Wimbledon tournament just last year, where he suffered a torn chest muscle in his round of 16 match against Yannick Sinner, which forced him out of the game for many weeks. This was just his second ATP match since returning, but he also returned in front of thousands on Tuesday with a 6-3, 6-2 win, and still showing some huge movements of quality in his match at the Brisbane International. He'll face off with Rafael Collinon on the round of 16 later on today. It is 12:35 p.m. Central African time, and that's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
All right, thanks so much to Onele and Musibudi. All right, let's remind you then of our hashtag Africa Updates. Asks China Foreign Minister is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania and Lesotho. What are your hopes and ambitions regarding this visit? Of course, we'll monitor our social media platforms. I'll give you a take of what some of you had to say after this discussion. But first, let's take you to this now. South Africa's Universal Basic Income Coalition says uncertainty around the future of a social relief of distress grant is creating growing concern among millions of beneficiaries as government confirms there is still no clear plan beyond the March 2027 extension. National Treasury has also indicated that proposals to replace the $22 a month grant are still being developed, with discussions focused on linking support for working age adults to skills and also employment programs. While researchers and civil society organizations warn that this approach risks excluding vulnerable people and overlooks the reality of a severe job shortage in the economy. For more on this, we're now joined on the line by Huda Abrahams-Faker, National Advocacy Manager at Black Sash. Huda, a very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting Black Sash, and compliments of the season to you.
Compliments to you too. Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. Just looking at the statements that have been made, particularly by National Treasury, indicating, that the proposals to replace the $22 a month grant are still being developed. What are some of your concerns that jump up, particularly when you look at the lack of clarity on the future of the SRD grant beyond March 2027?
Yes, as a coalition, which is a number of organizations that advocating for the social relief of distress grant to become permanent since 2020, we're now in 2026, and we're still having the somber conversation about the future of the SRD grant. We are concerned that there is no commitment on the part of government to actually make a permanent decision to ensure that the unemployed are catered for. So this narrative about linking it to employment, while we obviously want those living in South Africa to be employed, and so do those want to be employed, the concern is that there are no jobs. So in the absence of jobs, it needs to be complemented by an income that the government must provide. So this uncertainty is really quite a challenge.
Absolutely. How could, proposals to link the SRD grant to employment or even skills requirements affect the millions of people who are currently relying on this support, do you think, if you can expand on that?
Well, the grant is available to those living in South Africa who are unemployed and earn below a certain means test, which is 624 Rand. Now, if it's going to be linked to a employment or seeking employment or converting into a job seekers grant, there needs to be an indication that they are looking for a job. That's extra administration, extra costs. So at the moment, there's already so many challenges with access to the social relief of distress grant as it is. And it's really a very meager amount, but it does help people from being able to just stay on being able to survive with basic needs. So the challenge is that there needs to be agency where those that need an income are given that opportunity to be given an income, which they can then choose whether to look for a job because they would need money for transport, data, airtime, etc., or even become entrepreneurial so that there is some way of them growing the income that they get from this basic income support.
To what extent, when you look at the high levels of unemployment in this country, particularly when you're looking at the youth sector, to what extent does this uncertainty of the SRD grant pose to that problem and would compound that problem going forward?
We have a very high rate of unemployment in South Africa, and the unemployment rate is core in terms of this age group of the youth. So we are having graduates and there are not enough jobs being created. So at the end of the day, they need to have an income. So what is happening is it's compounding the fact that more and more are unemployed. They are struggling to access the grant because you have a challenge with the fact that it's exclusively online. It is in English. There is a means there. So there's a lot of administration to get the grant. So what happens is those that are in a family that have maybe access to a old age grant or a child support grant or disability grant, that grant is now being diluted to be able to support all those in the household. And what happens is, how are the youth expected to take initiative and generate income for themselves if they don't have a starting base or capital? I mean, 370 rand is not really what you can call capital, but at least some kind of income to be able to generate more.
Yeah. And I want to now delve deeper into the unemployment question. I mean, do you believe that government is adequately acknowledging that the scale of unemployment and the shortage of available jobs in South Africa? I'm asking you this question in light of several developments. I mean, just recently a very senior government official talking about how young people or those that are unemployed are not actively looking for employment, which has been, of course, criticized across the board in the country. There was also an analysis that was published recently by researchers that are arguing that the unemployment the way unemployment is framed has shaped ineffective policy responses. They go on to say, when unemployment is treated as a crisis of job seekers, attention is directed towards people's qualifications and their skills, their job-seeking strategies, their attitudes, turning the job seeker into the problem to be solved. Just your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think there are not enough jobs. I mean, the State of the Nation address for the last couple of years has made empty promises of job creation. And despite these promises, the unemployment rate is increasing quite quickly, and with no hope of addressing that. And so the challenge is that you need to look at the reasons why these jobs are not created. You're making reference to the fact that skills development is the graduates that we are churning out. Is it responding to the needs of the country in the context of structural unemployment? So that is definitely something that we need to address. But how can you make promises of employment and also want to link the fact that there should be access to basic income support, linking that to job seeking opportunities when there is no commitment to give that income so that people can find jobs? Because that is the problem. I mean, besides the job creation is also how do people access these opportunities when they don't have any income whatsoever.
Absolutely. Huda, thank you so much for your time. Let's leave it there for now. That's Huda Abrams, a Faker National Advocacy Manager at Black Sash, just responding there around South Africa's Universal Basic Income Coalition, saying uncertainty around the future of the social relief of distress grant is creating growing concern among millions of beneficiaries, as government has confirmed that there is no clear plan going beyond March 2027 extension. All right, let's continue then and give you more news. But before I do that, and remind you, of course, our question of the day on today's hashtag Africa Updates asks, China's foreign minister is visiting is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia for the first time since the 80s, in fact, as well as Tanzania and Lesotho. Our question for the day is, what are your hopes and ambitions regarding this particular visit? Share your thoughts on Channel Africa's social media platforms, at Channel Africa 1, that's on X and Instagram, at Channel Africa on Facebook, or you can send us your comments and voice notes to our WhatsApp number. That's +27 832886684. All right, we take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed. Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Unathi Batyashe still on for you for Lulu Gabu. This is Africa Update. Let's continue then and to this and give you a sense of what else is happening on the news at this hour. Caracas and Washington have reached a deal to export up to $2 billion worth of Venezuelan crude to the United States, according to U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, this agreement would redirect oil supplies away from China while easing pressure on Venezuela's production cuts. Trump says the deal signals a shift by Venezuela towards opening its oil sector to U.S. companies, warning that failure to do so could trigger tougher action from Washington. Channel Africa's economic reporter Innocent Simosa has more for us.
Venezuela has millions of barrels of oil loaded on tankers and in storage tanks that has been unable to ship due to a blockade on exports imposed by Trump since mid-December. The question is, how is the proposed export of up to $2 billion of Venezuelan crude to the U.S. likely to affect global oil prices and supply dynamics, particularly given that this oil had been blocked and was previously detained for China? Kevin Tutani is a political economist.
Obviously, what we're going to see with this is that China needs to find oil elsewhere. Obviously, there's to find oil closer to home. You're looking at from Russia and the Middle East, of course, and then oil from these areas is obviously going to increase in price because not all oil has the same price. You know, normally what's quoted as the international price is Brent crude, right? So Russian oil, which was obviously for a long time being sold at a discount to Russia, to India, will probably have a chance to perhaps have a slight increase in its price going forward.
Tutani shares his view on how Caracas might benefit economically from this deal and mechanisms that might be used to repatriate or access revenues.
What we have seen is that within Venezuela, the economy was being mismanaged. That's what we can say about what's been going on within Venezuela. The economy was being mismanaged. And you look at the statement made by President Trump a few days ago, it insinuates that the oil revenues were also being squandered by the regime which has been in charge of Caracas, because President Trump actually proclaims that he himself will personally preside over the funds that will, accrue to Venezuela for the oil purchased by the United States. So I kind of predict a situation where there's going to be a better use of the oil revenues than before. This is what I can say, not based off any evidence or anything, but I can say a hunch without evidence. You can put it that way.
But to what extent does this oil arrangement signal a shift in U.S.-Venezuelan relations, and could it meaningfully attract foreign direct investment, particularly U.S. oil companies, into Venezuela's aging oil sector?
In terms of them selling sanctioned oil, as a sanctioned country, in terms of them selling oil all the way to China, which is logistically further afield, number one, and them also having been financially sanctioned by the United States and other international financial institutions, including in the private sector, What we can also add is that having to sell the oil closer to home, and as President Trump was insisting in his statement, he confirmed that the United States will be buying this oil at market prices. So we can also perhaps assume that Venezuela will get better returns for this oil.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa.
Let the good times roll. From the 10th of October, make a note. Channel Africa is stepping into a brand new era with the launch of our upgraded website and app. It's easy, fresh, and always on your fingertips. Wherever you are in the world, Africa's voice is just a click away. The future of Channel Africa goes live from the 10th of October. Don't miss the moments. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
All right, Africa Update continues in just a moment, but joining us in studio is Matsheko, just to give us a sense of what's happening on the upside.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great, and yourself?
Good to meet you. So coming up on the show this afternoon with myself and Tebogo, listen, it's that time of the year, okay? The year has started, lots of motivation, wellness talk, all the good stuff. Mayo Febi is going to be joining us in studio in their capacity as a global executive coach, mindset facilitator, and founder of Mayo Febi and Associates, which is basically a transformation consultancy supporting individuals, leaders, and organizations across the African region. And we're going to talk about, bridging human psychology and practical action and how we can actually move forward in meaningful ways. Because this is the year, not next year, not 2030. This is the year to do it. So
absolutely.
That's a conversation.
And for people that actually didn't have time to think about what 2026 presents for them, I think this is an excellent time to listen to that. Looking forward to it.
Yes, it's going to be wonderful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Matsheko. Of course, the upside coming up between 1 and 5 with Matsheko as well as Tebogo. All right, let's continue then, just to give you a sense of what else we are looking at on the Africa Update. In fact, Somalia on Tuesday condemned Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar's unauthorized incursion into Somaliland, calling on Tel Aviv to immediately cease all actions undermining Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Somalia said such actions violate the UN Charter, the African Union Constitutive Act, as well as the established norms of international relations, including sovereign equality, territorial integrity, and non-interference. Earlier today, Channel Africa spoke to Dr. Seife Tadeli Kidane, a director of the Center of Governance and Intra-Africa Trade Studies and associate researcher at the University of Johannesburg, just about the implications of this particular visit.
It's a number of layers. I mean, as you know, that the Somaliland is positioned itself in a very strategic point of the Aden gateway for trade between Africa and Europe and the rest of the world. So that's very strategic for Israel. That's very strategic for Somaliland. As you know, Somaliland has been independently running this show for the last 30 years quietly. And the African Union, IGAD, and other regional actors were not playing, adequately in this regard. So Israel is playing in this vacuum, the vacuum which African countries, particularly in the Horn of Africa and in the East Africa, which they had never, involved in this matter for quite a long time. So this is very critical. As you know, Israel also in a very stumbling block with the Gaza situation. So this is a way out just to show their international concern. So it's a multi-layer kind of political gain for Israel. But for me, we shouldn't blame Israel rather than our own regional organization like African Union, IGAD, and others, who have never been played, a vital role in this regard for a number of years. Somaliland has been there as a de facto state since 89, and so we have never had a committee which is oversighting the situation, and even Somalia has never been entitled or in a position to voice itself against Somaliland. So there are a number of issues. I mean, political landscapes are playing in this regard. As we speak, we are hearing, beside Israel, the UAE, India, Morocco, Kenya, and Ethiopia is joining the recognition. We are not quite sure. I mean, we are not certain, but there is a rumor on that side.
All right, that was Dr. Tadele Kidani, Director of the Center for Governance and Intra-Africa Trade Studies and Associate Researcher at the University of Johannesburg, speaking about the visit of Israeli Foreign Minister to Somaliland.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
A situação do ativista angolano Serrote José de Oliveira, preso desde julho, tem gerado grande preocupação internacional. Conhecido como General Nila e presidente do movimento União Nacional para a Total Revolução de Angola, Serrote iniciou uma greve de fome em protesto contra a sua prisão, que considera arbitrária. De acordo com a Amnistia Internacional, o estado de saúde do ativista está a deteriorar-se rapidamente devido à falta de acesso a cuidados médicos adequados. Para discutir o impacto deste caso e o estado da liberdade política em Angola, vamos conversar com Dito Dale, ativista e defensor dos direitos humanos.
Nós estamos diante de uma clara estratégia de aniquilar os jovens, porque quando uma pessoa está doente, deve ser assistida. Ao não proporcionar esses cuidados médicos, o que o regime quer? Não quer que esse jovem saia livre e com vida da prisão, quer matá-lo.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Madapiri Bazoshitika. Madapiri Bazoshitika.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito yaulere mu zipatala zaboma mu dziko la Zambia azanyanyala ntchito lachisanu sabata yammawa, ndipo Daniel Shabanda kutambasula nkhani.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito mopanda malipiro apamwezi dziko la Zambia akuyembekezera kuyamba kunyanyala ntchito. Ichi ndi chifukwa chakuti boma lalephera walemba ntchito monga mmene lidawalonjezera. Channel Africa News yalankhulana ndi mkulu wa bungwe la madotolo la Resident Doctors Association of Zambia, Dr. Paul Chiwe, akugomeza kuti madotolo ambiri amene akugwira ntchito mu zipatala zaboma akugwira ntchito yaulere, ndipo ali ndi chiyembekezo chakuti tsiku lina adzalembedwa ntchito ndi boma.
Zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi Madapiri.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Well, it's a minute before 1 o'clock, and of course, at the top of the hour, the Upside comes up next. It's almost time to wrap up the show from the Africa Update. I'm Unathi Batyashe in for Lulu Gabu. Of course, we are asking you that important question, and we still want to hear from you. China's foreign minister is on a visit to Ethiopia, Somalia, Tanzania, and Lesotho. What are your hopes and ambitions regarding this visit? Engage with us on our social media platforms. Well, from me, Unathi, and the rest of the team here on Africa Update, it's Kamnandi for now.
Africa Update on Channel Africa. SABC News.